Hello, podcast listeners. You are now listening to the Coffee, Health, and Science Podcast. I'm your host, Jordan River, and I want to thank you for tuning in today. Before we get started, I urge you to spread the show. Share the show with a coffee lover. Tell someone about the CHSP. It's how we grow. Make sure you're subscribed so you catch every episode. Give us a good review if you would, please. I appreciate it. Today we have Dr. Coffee, basically my co-host at this point, back on the line. What up, Doc Coffee?
Hey, it's another day above ground, living the dream, my friend.
Oh, man, you had a little stumble there, but it's okay. We're still living the dream. You drinking caffeine today or what?
I am drinking caffeine, but I just got through working out, and I have this tickle in my throat because I really pushed that last set. So,
oh man, that explains it.
I stumbled because I was going to cough, so I didn't cough though.
Well, we hope that you've survived your exercise properly. We are going to talk about exercise today. In fact, that is the subject of today's podcast. It's a little bit of a hybrid episode, though, because we have a couple pieces of coffee news, just really quickly in the beginning, that I'd be so remiss to not talk about on this very episode. But then we are going to get into the aforementioned exercise, and we'll allow Dr. Coffee to take a drink of water to recover from his epic training. I can only imagine what that looks like. All caffeine-fueled, using large coffee bags as weights, sandbags, I imagine.
Absolutely, that's the only way to do it. But, it's really hard lifting when you've got an IV going into your arm with coffee, right?
Ooh, that made me cringe a little bit. So, listen, let's jump right into these crazy news stories, man. First of all, you came to me with one that was just outrageous. This Atomo Coffee. Forgive me if I'm pronouncing that wrong. I've only read this company name, Atomo, and I assume it's a play off the atom. Tell me about this molecular coffee without the bean.
Right. So, Atomo, if you're out there listening to us, I want to interview you. I want to find out everything you guys are doing. This is such a cool idea. With everything, we always have to look for the pain that somebody's trying to solve, right? So what is the pain with coffee? Coffee is just about the second most, can I call it carbon footprint product we have in food.
Right. It is the most heavily treated with pesticides. We clear lots of forest lands for it. It's a very industrialized. It is maybe one of the most industrialized food products.
Yeah, so that presents a really big problem, so much so that with climate change, and I'm going to go out on a limb here. If you have listeners who don't believe in climate change, I am sorry to say that climate change really does exist, and it's affecting coffee growth. I wouldn't care about climate change if it didn't affect coffee. The hell with my future generations. I want to make sure my kids can have coffee. So if climate change is affecting coffee, and we're going to have to move coffee to higher grounds,
right?
Not coffee grounds, but coffee grounds.
Higher elevation. Yeah.
We're doing it because due to climate change and due to the heavy usage that growing coffee causes,
right,
we've ruined where it's at currently. Mm-hmm. So that's going to be a massive undertaking. This group, Atomo, came out with the idea that they're going to create coffee in the laboratory.
Right. So you're skipping the completely industrialized farming process by simply creating coffee in a lab. It's a very interesting thought because, like you said, I feel like you have to come at this kind of destructive farming practice from two different angles. You can go one way or the other. You can get off of coffee, right? Get into the lab or the mushroom coffee or whatever it is, or you can go the other direction with the regenerative agriculture like Purity Coffee is doing. But we're going to need both. With the size of the coffee industry, with how many people drink coffee and the way it's being done now, there's room for everybody. We're going to need both, and we're going to need more than both. We're going to need a wide variety of solutions is what I'm saying. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. When we look at the world and we look at things that we use to take up part of our world, let's say when people pass away and you have to bury them, there's only so much land. Well, when you keep increasing population, and population loves coffee, and you keep having to increase the land usage for coffee, and coffee has this microclimate that has to grow in, and coffee has such a heavy footprint on land usage that at some point we're going to have to come up with another idea to help the ones who are still standing, like Purity Coffee, who are doing an organic, non-pesticide,
multi-crop,
regenerative farm.
Rainforest
exactly.
friendly. All of those things are very rare. That is not your average coffee. And it's regenerative, but it's hard freaking work. And not everybody can do that. They really, not everybody can put in those type of practices. So the more the merrier. And to be honest, from like a consumer perspective, I'm a little skeptical of the laboratory coffee, but I'm definitely intrigued, highly intrigued.
Well, I know you're skeptical. I was skeptical too when I first started studying on this. Well, we can look at coffee and we can really do a printout of the volatile and non-volatile components of coffee. And what Atomo did is that they looked at the big five and they said, what do we have to do in the laboratory to match the big five? So the first one is aroma. Mm-hmm. There are these, as I said, volatile and non-volatile compounds that lead to aromatic hydrocarbons, that lead to the aroma in coffee, and they are able to compete in a laboratory with exacting the aroma of coffee.
Wow. I wonder how many compounds that takes.
I don't know, and that's why if they're listening, I really want to interview them. Or have Jordan, he's the world's best interviewer, have Jordan do a podcast with you guys on what you're doing. But matching the aroma is the same as, it's like in perfume. They don't extract all the hydrocompounds from plants. Sometimes in perfume, sometimes the chemicals are man-made.
Right. That's
in
true.
a laboratory.
That's true. Okay, so aroma being first.
Okay, so aroma being first. The second one is mouthfeel. Mm-hmm. So in order to have the mouthfeel of coffee, you have to have the organic acids present to give that quality of what is left over on your tongue. And for that, they use upcycled plant materials. So they're able to look at other plants out there that have the organic acids that give you a very similar or the same mouthfeel. Then the third is color, and they can match color pretty easily.
Sure.
So that's not the hardest one in their group of five. The fourth one is taste. This is very interesting because there's been a couple of studies out there in which they've measured that part of the taste of coffee is bitterness.
Right.
Would you agree?
Absolutely. It's actually one of my favorite parts.
Well, you're standing alone because 68% of the people who drink coffee do not like the bitterness.
Yeah, a third of us, almost a third do. That doesn't surprise me. But yeah, you're right. People, that's the biggest complaint about coffee flavor. Too bitter. This one's too bitter. I need something more nutty or more smooth or whatever.
Yeah, and that's why, people like myself make big vats of cold brew because we like getting rid of some of the bitterness that happens when you heat coffee.
Sure.
So they are able to get rid of the bitterness in the taste pretty easily. And then the fifth thing is caffeine. And caffeine is available from other plants besides coffee, like cocoa or tea or cola, the cola nut. Oh, cool. So all those things have caffeine in them, or guarana. And they're able to extract the caffeine from plants that are not as farming restrictive and then they can add the caffeine back. So really, you could dial in to your laboratory grown coffee how much caffeine you want in it, which is pretty incredible thought.
That is cool. For the caffeine sensitive, you could literally get a 5%, a 20%, whatever, you know what I mean? If they could grade it, that's very, very cool. I'm definitely interested in it, and I want to try this Atomo coffee. They are, again, from the laboratory, molecular coffee without the bean, and I guess they got some big investments, multi-million-dollar investment, opening up a big Seattle location. Pretty interesting stuff, man.
Yeah, I think they're right next door to Starbucks out in Seattle, right?
Sending a message with that, yeah, exactly, putting up their headquarters right next to Starbucks. Atomo. We'll see how it pans out. I am definitely interested, man. Definitely interested.
Cool.
Thank you for bringing that to the table. I got a really, I mean, that was a deep one right there. I've got a really short one that I just needed to shout out when I saw this. Being from Algonquin, Illinois, out here, I saw this article about a local Chicago hip hop artist who is using his coffee shop and his organization, Coffee, Hip Hop, and Mental Health, to promote mental health services, raise money with coffee, and have therapy sessions in coffee houses. Christopher Lamarck, I just needed to shout this guy out. Really, really cool, man. He had his own struggles in like 2018, and he credits his recovery to hip hop and therapy. And now, like I said, he started. How close did that sound to the Coffee Health and Science podcast? His organization is the Coffee, Hip Hop, and Mental Health Organization.
I love it.
Isn't that wonderful? So I had to shout him out here, man. Christopher Lamarck. Really cool what he's got going on. If you're in the Chicagoland area, you can check out his Coffee, Hip Hop, and Mental Health Organization. Super cool, man.
Yeah, so if you're listening to this podcast, call in. Jordan wants to interview you.
Dude, you're a bigger hype man for me than myself, Dr. Coffee. I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it.
Well, you do such a nice job. It would be good to, I'm sure your listeners are tired of listening to me. It would be good to get some other fun people on, you know?
Oh, you're hilarious, man. Listeners love you. Yeah, you're moving at a nice clip on the show, and listeners love it, man. Anyways, listen, we're here. We had a topic today. We could just riff all day, and honestly, I think that's good pod. But we had a topic we were going to cover today. It's exercise. I really wanted to dig into this with you, Dr. Coffee. We did a lovely interview with an exercise expert not too long ago, who you turned us on to, the great Samuel Colby. He created the Core Pump. Cool product, but honestly, his expertise on the show is what blew me away. Really eye-opening stuff about exercise and recovery. And where I wanted to kind of bring it from there to you, since you're kind of more of a holistic, philosophical type guy, I would say, what I was really thinking about, man, when it comes down to it, we all have unique biologies, we all have unique lives and goals and aspirations. And when it comes to our fitness specifically, our health and fitness, it's just about getting crystal clear on your personal goals. No one else's goals are going to be quite right for you, and your exercise program should be largely determined by those personalized goals. It just really struck me the difference between, we all want to be these high-performing athletes. We want to be like these people on TV, But in reality, those people, they put their body through the ringer, man. And a lot of the time, it's just not feasible. So you need to get crystal clear on what you need in your life, figure out what fitness program works for you, and then work towards those goals. Does that make sense, Dr. Coffee?
It absolutely makes sense. In medicine, we're really talking about lifestyle and personalized medicine. I mean, that's the new game in town that, I've been screaming about for 20 years now, is trying to get as personalized with regard to medicine as possible. One shoe does not fit all. And the same applies to exercise to an extent.
Right.
So we have to understand what to an extent means. So the goals of exercise for everybody are slightly different, but they all, like coffee, they all have some kind of aroma and flavor that we're familiar with, exactly.
It's hilarious.
So no matter how you look at it, there are three types of exercise. There's exercise for fun, exercise to get your heart rate up and exercise to build muscle.
Okay.
Now, there's overlaps in all of them. So people that go out and play soccer and enjoy their soccer game, but also get a aerobic workout from it, there's an overlap.
Sure.
So I don't want anybody to think I'm trying to plug things into one peg fits all. But if we understand the three different types of exercise, then we can form an exercise program that's right for us. And I've been around the track with exercise my whole life now. I mean, it's really something that I've studied and read on and gone to seminars on. And so recently, I met up with a group. The doctor's name is Dr. John Jaquish, Jaquuish, I'm pretty sure is the spelling. And he wrote a book called Weightlifting is a Waste of Time. And I read the book 3 times, cover to cover, and it opened up my eyes, and my eyes were already opened. So for him to have cleaned up some of the cobwebs that were in my brain about exercise was really great. So I started doing something similar to his program. I had already been doing something similar, but I really upped it a notch since reading his book. And I must say that it's been worth every minute, every penny, every sweat for me to do this. So let me try and explain in 3 minutes what he says in his book that somebody can read. Yeah.
Because I assume that it's not replacing weightlifting with nothing. I assume that's not what he's saying.
It's not. So the traditional weightlifting that I've done for years is one day I do chest, shoulder, triceps, and the next day I do back and biceps.
Right.
Every day I do abs. Every day I do stretching. Every day I finish or start with some aerobic training. I mean, 2 days on, 1 day off, 2 days on, 1 day off. I mean, it's the same grind. SSDD. You know SSDD?
What is SSDD? I'm scared to ask, but what is it?
Same stuff, different day.
Right,
the word
right.
isn't stuff, but I'm keeping it clean for the program.
Yeah, I knew I was scared for a reason, but yeah, sure. You're right. I understand. That's almost like I don't want to mislabel this. So it's like the 80s workout kind of mentality. Like you got chest day and then you know what I mean?
Yep, exactly. So, I mean, I've done that kind of workout my whole life. And then as I start to get older, you know, I'm an old man now. So one of the big aspects of what I want out of a workout is not to get hurt.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I want to accomplish the same thing, maybe not bulk up anymore, but I want to keep muscle tone. I want to keep bone structure. I want to keep muscle flexibility, which keeps every morning I wake up, one bit of my muscle flexibility has run away from home. I'm never going to die. I'm just going to freeze up. People won't know I'm still breathing. They'll throw me into a box and bury me.
You're going to petrify, is what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to petrify. Yeah. I have Jewish arthritis. I'm going to be stiff everywhere, but what I really don't want to do is hurt myself at this point. So the notion of using a band, and this is similar to what Sam Colby talks about. With Sam, he uses a cylinder for progressive resistance. The harder you press against the cylinder or pull against the cylinder, the more it pushes or pulls back.
Right.
In using exercise bands, you can keep constant tension on the muscle. So if you are doing a bench press, a chest press, using a band, you push away from your chest, you're pushing against the band. And what Jackwish talks about is the fact that because you're using a band rather than a static weight, you can actually work the weakest and strongest parts of your muscle. With a weight, you're limited to the weakest part of the muscle.
Right. So it's more of a holistic exercise as opposed to a super targeted critical exercise.
Right. So if I'm lying on my back and I've got a bar in my hand and I've got 135 pounds on the bar, and I lift the bar up and I bring it down to my chest and then I push it up again, that rep is limited by the weakest part of the muscle.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a cotter pin or a linchpin. Cotter pin linchpin is a very important concept in health and fitness, and most people don't get it. So let me try and share it now.
Mm-hmm.
You've got this big, beautiful yacht, and you've got this really expensive engine on the back of the yacht, and you've got this really big propeller to move the yacht through the water. And what holds the propeller onto the engine is a 50-cent cotter pin. And if that cotter pin breaks, you're dead in the water.
Right.
It's the weakest link.
Mm-hmm.
And the same goes for bench pressing. At some point in your range of motion, you hit the weakest link, and that's the most weight you can use.
Right.
But with bands, you can use a much heavier resistance, and you can just change how far your repetition is going, the travel distance,
right,
so that you're continuously working both the weakest and the strongest.
I totally understand. So that makes it a more optimal exercise, both from a muscle building standpoint, I bet, but then also, like you said, an injury standpoint.
Right. So my chances of hurting myself now, of putting stress on the joint and hurting it, are much, much less. And what Jankwish said to me in his book were two things. The first thing he said is just do one exercise per body part to failure. So rather than doing 3 sets, I'm doing 1 set to complete failure.
Oh, interesting.
And that means I'm getting between 15 and 30 reps in, and I am shortening the travel distance as it gets harder and harder to do, till I'm swimming through concrete. I mean, I'm moving the bar away from my chest by an inch, mm-hmm. and that's all I can do.
Right.
So I'm doing it to complete failure.
But only once. That is an interesting, because I've heard a lot of different takes on never getting to failure, the old school, like I said, 80s mentality of getting to failure virtually every single workout. So this idea of doing it once in replacement of different reps, very, very interesting. Again, it's about finding what works for you, what's safe for you, right? I think a lot of people endanger themselves because of the first category of exercise that you said. So for instance, like CrossFit is a big fad and people love it, but that is a hard exercise on your body and people get injured. So, and if you're okay with that and it's like your passion in life, that's one thing, right? But I think it's just about getting clear on you don't need to put your body through that ringer and have that risk of injury to get the health and wellness levels that you might need.
Yeah, so again, there are 3 aspects I talk about when I talk about exercise. One is things you do for fun. One is things you do for weight training, muscle building. One is things you do for aerobic capacity. And when you're doing these core fit programs, which, they're not new. I've been doing chaining work using big, heavy chains for at least 25, 30 years. I wrote a paper on it many, many years ago.
Nice. I see fighters do that.
Yeah. So, before anybody was doing it, I was reading Louis Simmons' work and looking at Arthur's work on progressive resistance and writing papers on how we use chains and bands for progressive resistance. And it really makes a big deal in your training. But as you get older, being able to do 4 exercises every other day, so you're working out with pushes on day 1, pulls on day 2, break on day 3, pushes day 4, pulls day 5, break day 6. And during that time, you can go have fun, and you should always work on your core also. So I always start and finish with planks.
Nice.
But it's a great workout.
This was an excellent little exercise exploration. We have to cap it off, though, with something that I kind of fumbled on the podcast in a different interview. Someone was talking about the muscle building aspects of coffee, and I remember you had brought it up, but I couldn't remember the specific compounds that contributed, other than I know chlorogenic acid helps. But can you talk about exercise and coffee before we wrap up the show?
Sure. So one of the things I've been doing for sure is by adding protein to my morning coffee now. So I think that's really great. There was a study recently done in which they measured people's appetite during the day, and they measured people who took protein in the morning along with caffeine versus people who ate carbohydrates in the morning. And they found that the people who did protein and caffeine in the morning had less appetite during the whole day than the people who ate carbohydrates who were hungrier at lunchtime.
Oh, well, that doesn't surprise me.
And so since I'm a big believer in the one meal a day or in the keto, paleo concepts, I think adding protein to your coffee early in the morning, 2 cups of coffee, add a scoop of vanilla whey protein powder. For another discussion, we can talk about concentrate versus isolate and the difference between the two of them. I don't want to get into it today. But that will help not only in keeping you less hungry, but it'll help with fat loss. Mm-hmm. And it will help boost, people don't think in terms of adrenaline, but the number one hormone that every athlete looks to for high performance is adrenaline. It's adrenaline that gives us the boost in the gym. It's the adrenaline that gives us the kick so that we can do more reps and harder reps and faster reps. And so caffeine helps with adrenaline. We do have other compounds in coffee we could discuss. I don't know, should we do it another time? I don't know how we're doing time-wise here.
We are up against it here, but why don't we do a whole nother exploration on, we'll do a coffee and exercise deep dive, but I know the caffeine is a huge part, specifically with the blood dilation and all that good stuff. Okay, yeah, Dr. Coffee, this was a wonderful episode. I did not expect it to be so unique and informative. Thank you, my friend, as always.
My pleasure. Have a very fit day, everybody.
Absolutely. And stay tuned for a follow-up. We'll be back. New guests, old guests, and more. This is Dr. Coffee and Jordan River. So what do you mean and more? There's only new guests and old guests. This is Dr. Coffee and Jordan River signing off, saying have an extraordinary day. We'll see you next time on the Coffee, Health, and Science Podcast.